And howdy! Hey there, ho there. Hey, I'm Tom the Bear Whisperer. I am back at you. And I'm back. I poured a nice head on there, didn't it? Look at that. This is the Bridgeport Kingpin. Bridgeport Kingpin, double red. I went into Michael Buffer voice on you there. Double red ale, 7.5, 65 IBUs. I read from their website. I did a part one already, but I ran a little long, so I thought I'd just do another one rather than keep yakety yakking. Oh, I am a fan of this beer in particular because I talked about it in the last one. The combination of the caramel malts and the rye malts, you've got that big, that big richness of the caramel malts combined with the slight spiciness of the rye malt makes it just balances well with the hops. But rather than talk more about this, I thought I'd talk about the 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 evolution of the red ale in general. It has gone through a bit of an evolution. I think most Americans like me, I'm 47 years old, so I think most of us the first time we had anything called a red ale, for most of us, I knew it was probably Killian's Red, which is a Coors product. Of course, most of us didn't know that at the time, but truthfully, at that time, most people didn't care. But that's a whole different animal than from what this is. That was kind of an introductory beer for a lot of Americans. The American adjunct lager is a very light animal. There's not a whole lot to it. They're meant to be drank extremely cold. Most of them hover right about 5%. Most have adjuncts such as rice and or corn in them. I'm also having a little Jim Beam here. Jim Beam Black, some 8-year-old left over from Christmas. Mm. Very nice. I do like to have a little whiskey with my beer sometimes, and a whiskey like this just goes very well with a beer like this. Oh, but anyway, going back to what I was talking about, most Americans, their first experience with the red was Killian's. It wasn't a hoppy light like this one is. It was different than what Americans were drinking because even though ABV wise it was about the same, but it had a bigger, richer, more complex malt character to it. So it was kind of one of those introductory beers for a lot of Americans. The pickings were kind of slim back then. I'm talking about the late '70s, early '80s, up to mid '80s. The pickings were slim. I remember when beers like Heineken and Beck's first hit the shelves. Now, truthfully, looking back now, even Canadian beers like Molson, looking back now and tasting them now, there's not a whole lot of difference between those beers and the American adjunct lager, but there is a little bit of difference, and that's what Americans were used to drinking at the time. And then there were beers like Beck's Dark and Heineken Dark, which kind of that ambiguous kind of continental dark, mostly made for the American markets because they weren't really boxed, which was what a German dark would be. But again, they had more flavor than what Americans were used to, and that's kind of what that Killian's was. It's a beer that gave you a little bit more than what you were used to, and it was one of those things that some people liked it. Those that liked it probably knew at that time they were destined to drink better beer. I mean, for me it was a beer like that, and then I was able to find. I remember when I first saw an Anchor Steam in my market and gave it a shot. Probably about 87-ish. I thought, wow. I mean, that's a great beer. And then, I remember the first time I had a Guinness, probably about 86, where, there's 10 of your friends drinking, and you're the only one that gets it. Everybody else says, oh, man, that's terrible. It's like motor oil. And you're thinking, oh, okay, I get it, something different. It's kind of that taste evolution. But the American says American craft brewers really have taken that basic red style, which is using the similar malts that were in a beer, like Killian's, for instance. And then just kicking it up several notches. I mean, not even just a notch. I mean, I think one of the first examples I had several years ago was Grand Teton's Pursuit of Happiness, and that's one of the best beers ever. I don't even know if they're making it anymore, to be honest with you, but it was a fabulous beer. I mean, it's fabulous. I went all fruit fly on you there for a second. Fabulous. No, but I mean, it's a. Woo! Pursuit of Happiness was a great beer. But since then, I've had several, like this one here, the beer camp one I've had this year, Centennial Reprise Red. I'll talk more about that when I drink it. Personally, it's become one of my favorite styles for a lot of reasons. I love the big hops. I love hoppy. So I love IPAs, but I also love the India Darks or the black IPAs, depending on what you want to call them. And then this version, the hoppy reds. There's been, I don't know why things get controversial in the craft beer world. It's just incredibly silly what beer snobs choose to argue about, but. Of course, these are legitimate styles, the red and the India Darks. I mean, it seems like a lot of folks, if they don't want to drink it, they don't want anybody else to drink it either. Well, that's not a real. Of course, it's a real style. Of course it is, and they're great. It's one of those things that maybe they're not for everybody, but they're certainly a large enough niche out there to keep brewing them, and most companies are making these hoppy reds or India Darks because they're extremely popular amongst certain beer enthusiasts. Oh, it's just a great beer. 65 IBUs. That's pretty hoppy. 7.5%. You can argue if 7.5% is big enough to be called a double or imperial. Normally my line is 8%, but I'm gonna cut Bridgeport slack because this is a damn fine brew. I'm gonna waive that extra 0.5 for. And this is such a great version because it has got extreme flavor. It's got great flavor, yet, and it is incredibly easy drinking. If you're not into the hoppy thing, it may not feel easy drinking to you. But if it's a flavor profile you like anyway, yeah, it's going to be easy drinking for you. I mean, it's just beautiful. Oh, nice. So there it is. Kingpin, double red, and as you can see, I mean, I've still got most of my whiskey here, and it's not something that I don't slam, I don't do shots, I don't try to get drunk. I like the combination of the two. I love the contrast of the two. I like the way it works well together. That's why I like to, I kind of like to sip a jigger, a whiskey. A jigger, for those of you that don't, I guess that term isn't used anymore. You don't hear it as much, I guess. I mean, I grew up in bars, so I mean, it's just something I know. A jigger is basically an ounce and a half. An ounce is a shot, obviously. A jigger is a shot and a half. Now, I wish I had one for an example here, but you've all seen those big shot glasses. They're usually kind of thick glass, and they've got that white line. Well, if you pour up to that white line, that's the 1 ounce shot. If you fill it up to the top past that white line, well, that's a jigger. That's usually your shot and a half. If the bartender was doing you a favor, they'd fill it past that white line. That was kind of the thing. So anyway, there you go. Hey, I'm going to take one last sip. Ian, thanks for listening to me again. Bridgeport Kingpin. I love the Reds, and I'm going to be back talking about the beer camp next. Ta-da!